In the late 1960s, a series of brutal murders would terrorize Northern California and spawn one of the most perplexing criminal cases in American history. The killer left behind cryptic ciphers, taunting letters, and evidence that seemed to defy conventional investigative methods. But the documented facts reveal something far more disturbing than a simple serial killer case. The pattern of crimes, the impossible timing of events, and the supernatural precision of the killer's knowledge suggest forces beyond human comprehension were at work in the fog-shrouded hills of California. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed for more eerie discoveries. It was December 20th, 1968, just before midnight, when David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen drove to a secluded lover's lane on Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. The area was known locally as a quiet spot where young couples could find privacy away from the bustling San Francisco Bay Area. The road wound through rolling hills covered in dry grass and scattered oak trees, a landscape that seemed peaceful in daylight, but took on an ominous quality after dark. What happened next would become the first confirmed attack in a series that would baffle investigators for decades. The 17-year-old boy and 16-year-old girl were found shot to death near their car, victims of what appeared to be a random act of violence. But the crime scene contained details that immediately troubled the responding officers from the Solano County Sheriff's Department. The positioning of the bodies suggested the killer had forced them from their vehicle with methodical precision. David had been shot in the head at point-blank range, while Betty Lou had been struck multiple times in the back as she attempted to flee. The killer had used a .22 caliber weapon, firing with an accuracy that indicated either professional training or an unnaturally steady hand under extreme circumstances. 7 months later, on July 4, 1969, the pattern repeated itself with chilling similarity. Darlene Ferrin, a 22-year-old woman, and Michael Maggio, a 19-year-old man, were attacked while parked at Blue Rock. The location was less than 3 miles from the first crime scene, separated by the same rolling hills and connected by roads that seemed to form an invisible, geometric pattern across the landscape. The killer approached their vehicle in the early morning hours and opened fire without warning. Darlene died from her wounds, but Michael survived to provide investigators with their first eyewitness account. His description of the attacker would prove both helpful and deeply unsettling. The man was described as stocky, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, with a round face and dark hair. But it was the behavioral details that truly disturbed the investigators. Michael reported that the killer moved with an almost mechanical precision, never hesitating or showing any sign of human emotion. The attack lasted only minutes, but the gunman seemed to know exactly where to position himself for maximum effectiveness. Most disturbing was Michael's observation that the killer appeared to be following some predetermined plan, as if the entire sequence of events had been rehearsed countless times. Within hours of the Blue Rock Springs attack, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call that would transform the investigation from a local murder case into a phenomenon that defied conventional explanation. The caller spoke in a calm, measured tone, claiming responsibility for both attacks and providing details that only the killer could have known. The voice on the recording, preserved in police files, possessed an unsettling quality that went beyond mere menace. Audio technicians who analyzed the call noted unusual tonal patterns and speech rhythms that seemed almost inhuman. The caller's pronunciation was precise to an unnatural degree, as if each word had been carefully calculated for maximum psychological impact. But the phone call was only the beginning of a communication pattern that would prove far more disturbing than simple criminal taunting. 3 weeks later, letters arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each letter contained identical text, written in a careful, block letter style that showed no variation or human inconsistency. The letters were signed with a symbol that would become synonymous with the case, a circle with a cross through it, resembling the crosshairs of a rifle scope. But researchers who studied the symbol discovered it had appeared in various forms throughout history, often associated with astronomical calculations and ancient mystery cults that practiced ritualistic murder. More disturbing than the symbol itself were the ciphers that accompanied the letters. The killer had created complex cryptographic puzzles using a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols that seemed to follow mathematical principles beyond the typical knowledge of even educated individuals. The first cipher contained 348 characters, arranged in a pattern that suggested advanced understanding of both linguistics and numerical theory. When the first cipher was eventually decoded by a local couple, Donald and Betty Harden, the message revealed a chilling glimpse into the killer's mindset. The decoded text claimed that murdering people was the most thrilling experience possible, and that the victims would serve as slaves in the afterlife. But cryptographers who studied the solution noted that the cipher's construction required knowledge of multiple encryption methods that had only recently been declassified by military intelligence agencies. The most disturbing incident occurred on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Brian Hartnell, a 20-year-old man, and Cecilia Shepard, a 22-year-old woman, were enjoying a picnic on the lake's secluded shore when they encountered the killer in broad daylight. The attack at Lake Berryessa differed significantly from the previous crimes, suggesting that the killer was either evolving his methods or following some larger pattern that investigators could not comprehend. The killer approached the couple wearing a bizarre costume that seemed designed for psychological terror rather than concealment. The outfit consisted of a black executioner's hood with a white symbol painted on the front, matching the crosshair's signature from the letters. The killer wore dark clothing and carried a large knife, but witnesses who glimpsed him from a distance reported that his movements seemed unnaturally fluid, as if he was gliding rather than walking across the uneven ground. Brian survived the attack and provided investigators with the most detailed description of the killer's behavior. He reported that the man spoke in the same measured, emotionless tone that had characterized the phone calls. But more disturbing was the killer's apparent knowledge of details about the victims' lives that he could not possibly have obtained through observation. The killer had approached them, claiming to be an escaped convict who needed their car, but his conversation included references to their personal histories and private conversations that suggested impossible surveillance capabilities. He seemed to know their names, their relationship status, and even details about their families that had never been discussed in public. After restraining them with rope, the killer used his knife to carve the crosshair symbol into the door of Brian's car, along with the dates and times of his previous attacks. The carving was executed with mechanical precision, each line perfectly straight and measured. Investigators noted that the depth and consistency of the cuts suggested the use of specialized tools or inhuman strength. The killer then attacked both victims with the knife, inflicting wounds that followed a pattern consistent with ritualistic murder rather than random violence. Cecilia died from her injuries, while Brian survived to provide testimony that would haunt investigators for decades. The Zodiac case officially remains unsolved, despite numerous investigations by local, state, and federal agencies. The killer claimed responsibility for 37 murders in his letters, though investigators have only confirmed 7 victims across 4 separate attacks. The discrepancy between claimed and confirmed victims has led some researchers to suggest that the killer operated across multiple jurisdictions and time periods in ways that conventional investigation cannot trace. The final confirmed communication from the Zodiac arrived in 1974, but the letter's postmark and paper analysis revealed inconsistencies that suggest either the killer possessed resources beyond those of a typical individual, or the communications originated from sources that remain classified by federal authorities. Modern forensic analysis of the evidence has produced results that contradict many assumptions about the case. DNA analysis of saliva from the letters has yielded profiles that do not match any known individual in criminal databases. More disturbing, the genetic markers show anomalies that some researchers prefer not to discuss in official reports. The case files remain partially classified, with certain evidence sealed by court order and other materials transferred to federal agencies that decline to acknowledge their involvement. The true nature of the Zodiac murders may represent something far more complex than a single disturbed individual, involving forces and methods that challenge our understanding of criminal behavior and human capability. What do you think really happened during those foggy Northern California nights when the Zodiac struck with such impossible precision? Subscribe to explore more cases where the official explanations raise more questions than they answer.